In the previous lesson, we have seen how we can effect changes to the state in the store by dispatching Redux actions. Now, sometimes when you dispatch a Redux action, you may want to intercept it on its way to the store and make some modifications to the action before letting it pass through onto the store. Now, this is where the Redux middleware and Redux Thunk come to our help. Let's examine this in a little more detail in this lecture and then in the exercises that follow in this lesson. So what exactly is Redux middleware and what role does it play in our Redux application? The Redux middleware provides the capability to run a code after an action is dispatched, as I said in the introduction, before it reaches the reducer. Now, once an action reaches the reducer will act on the action and make changes to the state of the store. So before that point, you can intercept the action and effect some changes before the action reaches the reducer. So this is a place which enables third-party extensions to be injected into your Redux application. So for example, if you want to log all the actions that have been dispatched, that is a good point for you to first capture the action, log what the action is, and then let it move on to the reducer, and then you can then log the state of the application after the action is effected. Now, this is one example of a situation where a middleware will be effective in capturing information about what is going on within your Redux application. Similarly, if you want to allow asynchronous API calls, so for example, you dispatch an action, but that action would initially require access to a server from where you fetch the data and then send the data into your Redux store, then that is also a good place to interject a middleware in order to intercept the action and then carry out the async API call and then let the action proceed forward into the store. So how does this middleware work? So this middleware forms a pipeline that wraps around the dispatch. So as you saw, when you need to send an action to the store, you dispatch the action to the store. So this wraps around the dispatch, and then it can make any changes there, and it can pass the action forward if it requires. It can restart the dispatch pipeline as it is required. And not only that, at that point, you even get access to the store state if you want to look at the store state and then make any modifications before you let the action pass through. So that is what the middleware gets access to. So what can we use the middleware for? So here are a few examples of things that you can do with the middleware that you interject into your Redux application. So the middleware can be typically used for inspecting the action and then also the state. You can even modify the action. You can dispatch other actions and then wait for the results from those actions before you allow this particular action to take place. You can even stop an action from reaching the reducers if it is something that you wish to do, and so on. So there are many applications for a middleware that allow you to achieve your end goal. When you need to use the middleware in your Redux application, then you use the apply middleware function that is available from Redux. And so this will enable you to set up the middleware pipeline, and then this returns a store enhancer. So when you call apply middleware, it'll return a store enhancer, which you can then pass in as a parameter to the create store function that we have already seen being used when we created the store. So that is how we will apply the middleware for our application. Let's now talk about Thunk. That sounds terrible, right? Like something falling out of the sky onto your head. If that is what you think Thunk is, then you will thank me at the end of this lecture for changing your thinking on Thunk. So what exactly is Thunk? So Thunk is, in programming, what we mean by Thunk is a subroutine that is used to inject an additional calculation into another subroutine. So this is a way to delay a calculation until its result is needed. and also allows you to insert operations at the beginning or the end of another subroutine. Now, that may not make much sense to you at this moment, but when we look at Redux Thunk, then it will become a lot more understandable about what exactly the purpose of Thunk is in the context of a Redux application. So let's talk about Redux Thunk. So what exactly does Redux Thunk do for you? A Redux Thunk is a middleware. So again, this is one kind of a middleware that allows you to write an action creator that will return a function instead of an action. Now, if you recall the way you wrote action creators earlier in the exercise in the previous lesson, the action creator was returning an action object, and then we were passing that action object through the dispatch to the store. Now, a thunk allows you to return a function from an action creator. Now, when you return a function from an action creator, then that function can be executed, and within that function, you can design it in such a way that you can use it to delay the dispatch of an action. So, for example, you can delay the dispatch of an action until a certain condition is met. Say, for example, if you want to do a asynchronous API call to a server, you may use a thunk in order to generate the asynchronous API call. And then when the server replies and you receive the reply, at that point you can let the action proceed forward and then make modifications to the store. So this is a good example of where a thunk or a Redux Thunk will be very useful for us. So the inner function, so as you saw, a thunk is a function that returns a function. So the inner function that you define inside a thunk gets access to both the dispatch as well as get state. So what does this permit you to do? Because you have access to get state, you can examine the state and then see if this action fits and can be allowed with the current state. So that will allow you to even modify the action. And also you get access to dispatch. So for example, you can stop the current action, do something else, come back and then dispatch the action into the reducer. So that is what a Redux Thunk allows you to do. Now, with the availability of Redux Thunk, it allows you to do complex synchronous logic. So for example, with one action, you can actually end up dispatching multiple dispatches and may cause multiple effects if that is what you intend to do. You can even do conditional dispatch, so depending on the condition. So for example, if you issue an asynchronous API call to the server, and if the server returns the result successfully, then you can dispatch one action to the reducer. If the API call returns a failure, then you can dispatch a different action to the reducer to make changes to the state accordingly. So this kind of thing is easily supported by using a Redux Thunk. Indeed, this is exactly how we will make use of Redux Thunk in the exercise in this lesson, and also later on when we look at communicating with a server. Also, Redux Thunk supports simple asynchronous logic, and so that is where doing simple async calls to a server can easily be supported using Redux Thunk. If you want a more powerful way of doing things, then we have access to another library called as a Redux Saga. Now, I'm not going to go into Redux Sagas in this course. That is a little too advanced for us in this course. So we will only stay with Redux Thunk. A Redux Saga allows you to uses EX6 generators to generate pausable functions. Now, for the examples that we look at in this course, we don't need that complex asynchronous logic, so I am not going to go into Redux Saga at this moment. We will defer that to an advanced course later on. And also, the Saga allows ongoing background thread-like operations or processing behavior if you so require. So complex React applications that require that kind of behavior would definitely benefit by using a Redux Saga in the place of a Redux Thunk. But for the simple examples that we will look at, a Redux Thunk is more than sufficient to cover all the essentials that we need for our Redux application. With this quick understanding of Redux Thunk, let's move on to the exercise where we will apply the Redux Thunk and we will see what we will achieve by using a Redux Thunk.